Good morning everyone, Jenny Salesa, Minister of Building and Construction, and we've just had a very productive, very positive meeting with industry where we agreed a few things. I'm going to be taking an oral item to Cabinet later on today. One of the things that we would like to ensure moving forward is that we ensure that our ministries and our agencies adhere much more to MBIE's government procurement guidelines. That's one of the things that I'll be taking up to Cabinet, and that we're also looking at a reset. One of the things in terms of contracting in the government sector, we have not always adhered to having a whole-of-life approach, and so we're looking, moving forward, getting some advice from MBIE about what we should do as government, taking a leadership position to reset this moving forward. And I'd just like to introduce David Kelly, who is the Chief Executive of Master Builders, and he also convenes the vertical infrastructure construction folks, and he would like to talk about the things that industry has agreed that they would work with us in partnership moving forward.
Thank you, Minister. And first of all, I want to acknowledge the proactive leadership of three ministers here today in wanting to engage with the construction sector. The larger commercial sector does have some problems at the moment. I don't think it's any secret. We as a sector need to step up, so we're undertaking some work ourselves around guidance to our members to really understand the risk they're taking on, to think harder about what they're signing up to. We do need to address some issues around the margins that contracts are being tendered for, so we need to do that work ourselves, but we welcome the government's approach. We do want to work with government, and having some political leadership is really important, and we do appreciate that.
Do you think the government offered enough solutions today?
I think it's a very good start. We have to start with some simple things we do right now, and so we've identified 3 or 4 of those. I think it's a very good start, and we'll build on that.
So what are those 3 or 4 things?
As Minister Salesa has already said, she's got an oral item to talk about government procurement. From the construction sector side, we're developing guidance to our members that we will release Thursday of next week. We have a whole of industry forum that Master Builders convenes, and we'll be releasing that and talking about what those elements are. And one of the chief executives, Rick Hurd from Naylor Love, will be presenting that.
So this is only government contracts that you're dealing with?
Yes, we're taking a leadership. In terms of government contracts, we actually have 18% of the vertical sector at the moment. 10% is local government New Zealand. So the majority of contracts in this area are actually private sector. However, we've made a decision to take leadership in what it is that we, in terms of our procurement process from government.
So what's been going wrong with the government procurement process that has required some changes or some reminder that the rules need to be followed?
So there are, as I say, MBIE government procurement guidelines. Unfortunately, they're not something that every business takes into account or adheres to. It is not compulsory. So one of the things that I'm taking through to Cabinet today is can we as government take leadership in this? Can we as government ministers write letters to our ministries and our agencies to say, show us some evidence that you've actually taken the government procurement guidelines into consideration as you're negotiating contracts.
Can you give us an example of where the government hasn't followed the guidelines and it's actually hurt the construction?
I can't give you a specific example at the moment about where government agencies. The other thing I also want to say is 97% of contracting is actually done by agencies themselves. It's not actually driven either by MBIE or from ministries, and so that's one of the things that I'm going to government, because this is not just up to the 3 of us as ministers to address. This is a whole of government approach. There are many other sectors in government that has their own contracting processes. I've got to say though that Minister Jones and Minister Twyford are both involved in overall procurement process in terms of government looking at how can we do procurement better moving forward.
So
the deep thing is, this is a health episode, and when a health episode strikes either an organisation, a sector or an individual, you do a reset, or you contemplate certain death. So what we're supporting our Minister to do is bring forward a proposal that us three ministers lead a body of work that explores how do we effect a reset whilst not endangering taxpayer liability but giving greater confidence to the construction sector, and it's linked to the work that Phil Twyford and I are driving in terms of the creation of an independent infrastructure entity that houses the best quality of advice the government can get, overcome some of the siloed historical issues that we've had as a state, because we're on the hook for infrastructure spend, of which Minister Salisa is partly responsible for billions and billions of dollars. That paper is wending its way through the system as we speak, and it's going to have a big impact on Minister Twyford's Urantian project.
Are you saying that one of the issues here is about least cost? Oh, sorry. One of the issues here is about least cost procurement, and as Minister Salisa said, we recognise government, even though its government contracts are a minority of the work that this part of the construction industry does. Government has a responsibility to lead here, and so we're willing to take a hard look at the government's approach to procurement. You know, another part of the construction industry is the civil contractors, the people who build all the horizontal infrastructure, the roads, the three waters and so on. They have a very different approach to risk allocation than that part of the industry. It's more a collaborative approach, it's a negotiated and transparent approach to risk sharing. So maybe we can learn some lessons from that part of the industry for the vertical infrastructure sector. So that's one of the things we're saying today. We're willing to take a look at the way the government does procurement in this industry, because we recognise not only do we want good whole of life cost analysis to underpin procurement decisions, but it's of strategic importance to the government that we have a competitive and efficient New Zealand-based contracting industry to do this work.
Minister Jones mentioned the phrase reset or death. Is that the point that we're at right now, the fork in the road? Is it either reset or is it death?
Let's call a spade a spade. We've had eBird, we've had the red ink from Fletcher's. We're not ignorant of the fact there's a lot of pain and pressure there. There are some good players in this sector, and they're calling on the government to see what we can do with our 18-20% worth of influence, and that's what politicians are meant to do. You respond to industry, but I would say, as I said on telly last night, there's a huge duty on us to do nothing that worsens taxpayer liability, but also we are concerned, what are we going to do? Outsource everything internationally if we can't keep a robust and sustainable construction sector in New Zealand? Our government's not interested in outsourcing that to that level of international inputs.
Has the government forced contractors to take on too much of the risk in the last few years by essentially trying to transfer risk to the private sector?
Well, I think the argument is that all of the customers in this sector have been doing that, and maybe the government has, but we're going to go and look at our procurement practices now and see what we can do to help the industry get back onto a stronger footing. I think one of the really encouraging things about the discussion this morning was that we've got some of the leaders here, some of the best companies in the vertical infrastructure sector, and they are saying they are ready to step up and they're going to do their bit alongside the government to deal with these problems.
So
do you think that
Kelly, can you give an example yourself of where you think government agencies might have damaged the construction industry?
No, I'm not going to get into specifics. I think the point that Minister Twyford just made is the really important one. This isn't all about government. There's been a general trend over quite a long period of time from a lot of clients to go for the least cost model. Unfortunately, far too many construction companies have ended up buying into that system. And I think one of the most important things that came out of today is a statement from ministers that this industry is strategically important to New Zealand. It is important to our economy, it is important to our social fabric. If we start from that point of view, we have quite a different mindset around the whole procurement approach. What I believe is important is that the government provides some leadership, they're doing that, and that will set the scene that I think a lot of others will follow. It also allows, if you have reasonable initial margins that the businesses reinvest in themselves, they can give better value back to the government and to other players. I think the real issue is the problem with a short-term focus is that you just focused on the initial cost. and not understanding the longer term damage that is done both to the industry and to New Zealand's competitiveness.
Should the government give more reassurance about future projects? Because all they're talking about here is procurement, and what the industry needs is lots more big projects.
I think that longer term planning is really important. So that is a part of it, and that was touched on today. And Minister Jones can probably talk to you.
No, I think you're on the button there. The infrastructure suppliers, investors, they are basically saying we're not giving enough clarity and we're not enabling people to plan over several election cycles. Now, you've heard all this before. I genuinely believe that that's a legitimate criticism, and I think one of the reasons why the civil construction sector have quite a robust set of players is that they can see over a long period of time, Bernard, where the money's going to come from. It comes via Land Transport Authority from our various excise duties. So there's up to 45 billion potentially over a 10-year period. So you're able to plan your business. And with the creation of the new infrastructure entity, we are, amongst other things, we're wanting to give confidence and visibility not only to Kiwi firms, but there will be firms come over from time to time to Australia, that it's a government that's got a long-term plan, long-term commitment to the capital and innovation within capital, and a reservoir of talent that can deal with some of these. I mean, the profits that the legal sector of New Zealand are leaching out of infrastructure are extraordinary. Why? Because we have these Byzantine sort of contractual arrangements. I'd like to see them simplified. I'd like to see them standardised. And if our new infrastructure entity can save the government money in that way over the long term, I'm all for it.
So do you think there's a crisis in the construction industry?
Well, I can only follow what these gentlemen have said today. They said that there are some very good players, but we should not overlook the fact that the afflictions that have brought down EBIT and damaged Fletchers, we should treat them in a very deadly and serious way, and that's why we've called this meeting and we're sharing our views with you, and Minister Celeste is going to bring the entirety of the Cabinet up to speed by the end of the day.
Minister Twyford, is $2 billion going to be enough for KiwiBuild if you have to move to this different model of procurement?
Well, the KiwiBuild procurement model and the $2 billion capital fund for it, it's not really affected by the issues that we're talking about today. Residential is a whole other part of the industry, and we know residential's got its challenges, but the things that we're talking about today are really specific to the vertical infrastructure sector, the large commercial and public buildings. There's a bit of crossover with some apartment developments, but essentially it's a different part of the industry.
But there are apartments being delayed though, right? So what reassurance can you give about that?
Well, if you're seeing delayed apartment projects, it's not because of the kind of issues we're talking about today. It's generally because of lack of access to finance and liquidity. And we have policies to agree with that.